Hello, thanks for coming back and watching the sixth story in my series of stories that I'm doing as a testament to God's incredible goodness and mercy to me as I persevered through all the mental health, mental illness, definitely mental illness struggles I used to deal with on a regular basis. So I'm gonna get right into the story. So the day came finally for me to fly out to San Antonio, Texas for my basic training because I had just joined the Air Force. And I'm getting to the airport and I see a whole bunch of us, a bunch of other recruits getting ready to ship out. And I quickly became friends with them. It was total buffoonery and nervous energy as we're running around trying to enjoy the last few minutes of our freedom and civilian life. I ditched my family because they came with me to see me off. And I was like, I'm going to go hang out with my new friends. One of them had convinced me to let him shave my head. I'm thinking, I'm about to get it buzzed anyway, so go ahead. I don't care. What's the difference? But the problem is he didn't have an electric razor with him. All he had was like those disposable Bic razors. So we're in the airport bathroom, and he starts shaving from the bottom of my neck up. But we ran out of time because we were about to fly out. So he made up as far as about right around here, right? He didn't even get anywhere. So I like this crazy chopped looking kind of haircut. It looked like he used a battery-powered weed whacker on my head. Total hack job. I go off to say goodbye to my parents, and they see my ridiculous haircut, and they just kind of shake their heads. I'm sure they were praying that the military would knock this nonsense out of me. Now we're on the plane, and something became very real. All the nervous buffoonery that was befalling us in the airport kind of went away as we're on the plane because we now knew this was for real now. This was time to get real sober here and quiet. Very quiet flight. We land, and I'm sure this is intentional. We got there when it was dark because darkness and disorientation are incredible tools for breaking you down. So we get off the plane, and we're immediately greeted by these screaming drill sergeants yelling at us to go here, follow me, let's go. And they're herding us this way while the normal passengers who are still free and not going off to their death going this way. So we get outside, we find a whole line of buses waiting for us. They're still screaming at us, tell us to get on the bus. We do as they tell us. They're screaming at us the whole way to finally get to the base. And then we park and we're getting yelled at to get off the bus and get in line and line up and screaming. And we don't know what that looks like. We're new to this. We're just kind of like deer in headlights. Just like, oh man, what have we done to ourselves? So I'm one of those deer in headlights kind of guys. All of a sudden, I'm like confronted by this screaming, red-faced drill sergeant because he notices my haircut. So he's making fun of me, telling everyone, come over here, look at this idiot. So I got, like, I don't know, three, four drill sergeants all standing around me, pointing at me, mocking me, calling me a clown, telling me, boy, you're in for a treat. It got pretty bad quick. So now we're about to leave, and as we're about to leave, one of the drill sergeants grabs me and puts me in charge. See, because I went there having 2 years of college, so I was automatically 2 ranks higher than everybody else. So let's put this kid in charge and see if he can handle it. So I just get in there. I'm getting yelled at and made fun of for my haircut, and now I'm getting yelled at because I'm not leading these people correctly. It was just an absolutely horrible way to start my military career. So we all get in our barracks and we're told to go find our bunks where our names are on the lockers and like a horrible metal bed in front of each locker. The room looked exactly like every military movie you've ever seen. Cold and sterile and depressing. We were instructed to dump all of our belongings on the bed because the drill instructors were going to come through and make sure we didn't have any contraband with us and whatever. It's going to pawn through our stuff. So at this point, I was very fascinated with serial killers. Not so much because of the violence, but just what made these people become serial killers. Like what flipped the switch in the brain for them to become pure evil. I didn't understand what was happening in my brain at this point, but I was just very intrigued by psychology and the power of the mind. So at this time frame, one of the best-selling books was Jack the Ripper's Diary. It was supposedly discovered in some dresser that was bought at a garage sale. I don't remember the story exactly, but I love this book. It was such a fascinating book. So I brought that and my Bible as my only 2 reading materials with me to basic training. So I'm watching everyone get screamed at when all of a sudden there's like very large, burly scary female drill instructor just lands at my bed and starts pulling through my stuff. She finds my Bible and the Jack the Ripper diary, and she just goes off on me. She's yelling at me for having two opposite things and accusing me of being a Satanist and mocking me for mixing God with the devil and asking what my problem was. Why don't you love Jesus? It was awful. And she starts yelling, all the other instructors come over and start, yelling at me some more. So now I'm getting more yelling going on. And she's warning them to keep an eye on me because I was going to be a problem. I'm like, my goodness, what a terrible start. I've been here for 2 hours. Already my military career was just going down the toilet. But thankfully, things changed for me very quickly. Because I was basically in Special Forces shape from all my training, I excelled at everything physical related to my basic training, which was good because my main drill instructor was like this 5'8" Ukrainian, just terrifying, one of the scariest people I've ever known in my life. He was famous on this base for always having the best flight, which in the Air Force is like a platoon, that's what they call them, for having the best flight, 13 training sessions in a row on the entire base. And he was determined to make us number 14. He mercilessly drove us like a slave driver day in and day out. But it never really bothered me because I had no problem with it. The riggers were no big deal. I also had some insider info before I left. All my recruiter buddies had prepared me for what to expect. Making sure I understood this was all just a big game for them. It wasn't personal. The other thing they told me about was if they don't ever know your name, you're doing good because you're not ever praised during basic training. You're only yelled at. So if you don't know your name, it means you haven't caught their attention. I'll never forget this. One morning, we're out marching like we're always marching. It's probably 5 in the morning, 5:30. And I learned how to march kind of like half asleep. This is exhausting. It's about 3 weeks into this at this point. All of a sudden, I hear, Jones, get in step. Man, he knew my name now. It was the first time he ever used my name. So now it's on his radar. No matter. I just okay, get better. I let this happen again. 4 weeks. So now we're at the point where all recruits are kind of separating themselves from everybody else. And we're doing a lot more competitions and timed running and physical contests, all these kinds of things. I was always, all of our little 1 mile runs, I was always 100%. I won them all. Just facts. I'm just telling you what it is. I was just really in shape. So the thing is, I was never timed. So I had no idea how fast I was running. At the end of this event, we were all back in their barracks and sat down to hear our times read off to us. Because everything was done alphabetically. My last name's Jones, so I'm in the middle. At this point, the second command drill instructor is just kind of mindlessly reading off names, reading off times. He gets to mine, he's like, Jones! And he stops. It's a little quiet, and he looks at it and says, this can't be right. 452? You ran a 452 mile, Jones? I'm like, I guess so, Sergeant. He says to me, he goes, man, Forrest, you run like the wind. So he was doing a whole Forrest Gump thing. Apparently, I broke a long-standing record for fastest mile on base. Who knew? Unbeknownst to me. But that was good because that was earning me bonus points and kudos. So training's done. My parents came to graduation. They met my Ukrainian sergeant, and he did something that he's not real well known for. He praised me. He was praising me up and down to my parents, telling them that I was one of his best recruits, and that he had no problem recommending me to be part of the combat training, military police training, which was going to be next. And I was like, oh, wow, thank you, I appreciate that. And I started to feel real good about myself. I knew my parents were proud of me. I thought possibly I was going to finally turn a corner. All my screw-ups and my mental issues were behind me. I was finally becoming a success. Next day, we started our training. My training was on the same base as where my basic training was, so it was just a quick, short bus ride to the other side of the base. Thankfully, all the stuff I'd accomplished in basic training followed me to now my combat training. One of my trainers was a master sergeant, and he took a real special liking to me. And one of those things he liked about me was he held the fastest run time for drill instructors on base. My run time was higher than his. So he loved it. He just loved that I was faster than him. One of the more early mornings, we're doing our 3-mile run. I don't know what point this was in the training, week 3, 4, whatever it was. And I remember I'm just way ahead of everybody else. Like, you can't even see anybody behind me. He pulls up alongside me, his Jeep rolls down his window. He's like, Jones, get in here. Obviously, you're in shape. You don't need to finish this run. So I'm like, okay. So we got it in there, and we drove to the end of the 3-mile run. We just sat there and talked as we waited for everybody to catch up. That was such a great story. I love that. So just a couple more quick stories as I finish this up. Because everything that I accomplished, I was immediately made a student leader again during training. And one of my duties was to march, groups to class, and also to check on the dorm rooms. It's kind of like college at this point, where we had a roommate, we had our own dorm room, and to make sure that everybody was in by curfew. Another duty that was mine was to babysit people who were under house arrest because they either broke a rule or they're in the process of getting dishonorably discharged. At this point, there was a trainee who kind of became a bit of a celebrity on base because he was apparently at this time one of the only ordained Satan priests in all of New York City. Okay, all right. He joined the Air Force, but he was just always in trouble. And also nobody wanted to be around him because they were terrified of him. He was the only one who never had a roommate, and on both dorm rooms on either side also had nobody in there because nobody wanted to be anywhere near him. There were like 3 rooms all in a line, only one roommate, only one person in there, and that was him. One of the things he got busted for was painting a pentagram on his floor, right in the center of the floor, and doing satanic rituals. Oh, man. One of his other favorite things he loved to do was he would just walk around base on his free time and just stop random people and do card tricks for them. I mean, the guy was David Blaine before David Blaine was out there. Who knows? Maybe he was David Blaine. He just hadn't come out that became David Blaine yet. He did a couple for me, and they absolutely freaked me out. I have no idea how he did these things. So, magic is magic, I get it, but these were off the charts. At this point in my time, I was still pretending to be a Christian, but my life was absolutely not reflecting it whatsoever. Not at all. I just, I don't know. I just became very rebellious. Thing is, though, whenever I was around this guy, I felt like my inside, my spirit was just kind of being torn apart when I was around him. I just hated being around this guy. So time came. He eventually overstayed his welcome. The Air Force was kicking him out dishonorably. I had to go escort him from his dorm room to go see the colonel. I didn't want to do this, but it's the military. Do what you're supposed to do. Go there, knock on his door, and he yells for me to come in. So I opened the door, but I wouldn't come in. I just stayed in the hallway. I just did not want to be in this guy's room. He's in the back. You go past 2 beds. In the back is the sink, and then there was the toilet and the shower in a separate room. He's back there shaving. He had to shave before he presented himself. He's like, "Get in here, Jones." I'm like, "Nah, I'm cool right here." So he finally is calmly "Jones, get in here and keep me company." So I breathe deeply, and I go in there and just kind of stand there and watch him shave. This guy used no water and no shaving cream. Just used a disposable Bic razor and just like a hack job. Zip, 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 zip. Not one nick, not no drops of blood. He was just haphazardly shaving. I'm getting really uncomfortable watching this. I'm feeling everything starting to get all intense inside me. Wanting to kind of just, take the edge off the air. I said to him, I said, "Do you feel uncomfortable when you're around me? I mean, do you know who I am?" And he's like, "Of course I know who you are." I'm like, "Why don't you feel it? Don't you feel that internal warring between us?" And I remember he's just he looks at me and he's like, "I feel completely fine." His eyes were cold and dark, he was staring into my soul. I'm like, I'm done. The heebie-jeebies of being in this guy's room, being around him, off the charts. I told him, "Hurry up, get outside. I'm going to be out there. Just let's go." So I take him there, and that's it. Training's over. There was 64 of us in the beginning, and 8 of us graduated at the top of our class, and I was one of those 8. because I had done such a good job, I was granted my duty-based request, which was Okinawa. But then they offered me something else. They said, if you want, you can be stationed at the Air Force Academy in the Colorado Springs. I'm like, what? Because back then, you couldn't request it. It was by invitation only. Because this base was the best of the best. Full bird colonels and generals everywhere. So for the enlisted who were stationed there, they also required to be the best of the best. I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. So I'm like, my pride is swelling. I knew my time in college was a total fluke. I knew I wasn't a screw up. I knew that all those things in my head, all those feelings telling me that I was worthless and that I just needed to, cut my wrists and stop wasting everybody's time. Just kill yourself already. All those things that were constantly going on in my brain, I knew they were wrong. I had finally found my groove. I was finally becoming successful. I knew military was it. I found it. I found my groove. And I was just like, I'm at the top of my game. Problem was, that feeling of success, that lasted for about 2 weeks because the wheels had fallen off. The day I was supposed to fly off to my Colorado Springs to start my duty base. But that's a story for next time. Thank you. As I've always said, as I battled through all my mental health and as God has mercifully stayed one step ahead of me, as all the things that were going on in my brain began to manifest themselves and, risky behavior and, lack of a better term, suicidal tendencies. I mean, life went on a couple of years later. I was determined to accomplish suicide by God. The term suicide by cop. I wanted to live such an evil, wicked life that God would just take me out. But obviously he didn't. He overruled all my terrible choices and my bad decisions and brought me to the end of myself. I encourage you, if you are struggling with all these mental health and different issues like I've been talking about, don't do it alone. Get help. My website, as I've said, there are links to help. There's places that you can go to, people you can talk to. Reach out to people that you trust. Bring people beside you. Help them. Let them help you. Don't do this alone, okay? There is help, and the help is found in Jesus first and foremost. Okay, thank you so much. Come back, see what happens to me next as I get to Colorado Springs. As always, keep pressing on.